Kick off again. Quick announcement is that after the conference at 7 o'clock this evening, hopefully everyone can head along to Ground Control, which is apparently an arcade that serves beer. I've just been informed. And that's going to be where the after party is. So with that, over to the Teyo guys for the first live, the first live DevOps cafe going out to the world.
Am I on? Can you guys hear me okay? Yeah, all right. So first, let's get a big round of applause for all the Puppet Labs organizers, everybody. John, your sign, please. Your sign, please. Oh, sign. And let's keep it going a little bit here for our panelists right now. We're going to have All right, anyways, welcome to the first live episode of DevOps Cafe. We've done this format before, but we did it in front of a single camera person, so this will be the first time we have an audience. Feel free to cheer, laugh, boo, whatever you guys want. Yay. Exactly, that's what we want to hear. So I think first thing we're going to start off, just a quick introduction. If you just could say your name and your current position at Puppet Labs.
James Turnbull, I'm the VP of Technical Operations.
I'm the book author.
And I wrote a book about Puppet, two books about Puppet.
Scott Johnston, head of marketing and product. Luke Kanies, I mostly stand around.
Teyo, Tyree, I'm head of business development.
Yeah, and I'm Damon Edwards, by the way, and that's my co-host, John Willis, over there. If you guys want to subscribe to our podcast, it's you can go to devopscafe.org, or actually it's on iTunes. Just search DevOps, only one of a few, I believe. So we cover all sort of topics that are kind of DevOps related, operations related, tools related, and figured since we're here at PuppetConf, almost said Puppet Camp, PuppetConf, we figured we'd get a panel of some senior Puppet Labs management up here and throw some questions at you and shake it up and see what happens. Some of these came off the internet from people, tweeted us and as well as sent us emails. But we will be nice. So, DevOps, right? Relationships matter, people matter. So, Luke, you're sort of the spoke of this crew of Puppet Labs folks. So, I want each of you guys to tell me the first time you met Luke. Short story. Keep it clean.
So I first met Luke when I started using Puppet, and I thought the docs sucked ass. And I sent an email to this guy, Luke Kanies, and I said, look, I want to write a book about Puppet. I reckon it'd be really cool. And Luke's response was, gee, I always thought I'd be the one that write the book about Puppet. And then I think we had a few email exchanges, and eventually got to the point where I was like, well, I'll barter you some labor. I'll update your documentation and help you. And everything I document in the book, I'll update in the wiki. And I then spent the next 8 months pinging him with obscure questions about, you say this works, but...
That's good. So prior to joining Puppet Labs, I was on the investment side, and I tried to invest in the company 3 times, and each time Luke turned me down. Ooh. Yeah. So it started off...
It wasn't you.
It wasn't me.
It was him, not you. Yeah.
And so it started off rough, but now that we're together, a lot of love.
Persistence.
A lot of love.
He's the most recent member. You just joined in July.
Sort of like a stalking story. That's great. Luke?
Luke, how'd you meet Luke?
He hasn't met himself yet.
Yeah,
Don't want to hear that.
Teyo, trip in the 80s.
Teyo, you've got to have a story like in the playground somewhere, right?
No, well, we didn't grow up together, although we grew up in similar areas of Tennessee.
We got old together.
Yeah, so I met Luke. Luke was the grumpy old sysadmin in the basement of a startup that we were. I was working at. And we have another guy that's here from Blue Star, and he was. I think the first time I really met him, he was pissed off because some sysadmin was trying to install a Solaris box from a CD, and he railed at him. The guy didn't want to use automation, and so Luke screamed at him, I think.
Still haven't forgiven that guy.
But I really got to know Luke at his wedding. I showed up at his wedding. Somehow I got invited, and his father-in-law had homebrew, and so I was like, this guy's okay. There was good homebrew.
Sean, what about you?
So I was tweeting about this really cool bottle of scotch that I had gotten from London, and happened to be going to the Ohio Linux Fest, and Luke tweeted me like, hey, let's drink it. And so we stayed up very, very late finishing this bottle. And now Luke's version of it is I wouldn't leave. I bought his hat. I love your hat, man. That's such a cool hat. And he says that the reason he sold it to me was this is the only way to get me to leave. But I think he wanted the $40, but I did give it back to him the next day. So.
That actually wasn't the first time we met. We met at bar camp in Nashville.
Oh, that's right. That's Bar Camp Nashville. That's right. Yep.
That's first story was much better though.
Yeah.
Stick with that. So, all right. So this question's a little bit played out, but purpose of discussion in the audience, I think it's important we kind of cover this, right? So let's do another quick round. What is the essence of DevOps, right? When people hear the word DevOps, is there some idea or thought that you want them to have in your head other than Puppet?
Well, for me, it's I want to work in an environment where people get along. I don't want to go to war rooms anymore where developers yell at sysadmins and ops people and where security people say you're all fuckwits. I want to actually go to war rooms where people go, we've actually got a fucking problem to solve. The business is in trouble. Let's go and do it. And that's what DevOps is about for me.
Go and do it.
Continuous improvement. You're never DevOped, you're never finished, but like every day you come in and you're going to make it better, you're going to focus on making it better, and so the destination is the journey. Right?
For me, it's a lot like what James was saying, basically, that if
Sorry,
everybody
we had
has...
the expletives probably.
Maybe. Everybody has shared goals, and when you recognize and focus on your shared goals, the results that you're trying to bring to the organization, then it's a lot harder to have fights. And if everybody's focused on, well, we use these tools and you use those tools, and we use these processes and you'll use those processes, then it's a lot easier to get mired into battles and processes and stupid things like that. So for me, it's a lot like what Agile development did to the development. Try to focus development on the results, the product, the application, and not how we got there. Operations, DevOps is about getting operations to focus on what are we trying to do and why are we trying to do it and why is it important, rather than what tools we're using or what process we have or whether we hate developers or project managers this week.
For me, one of the things I think is there has to be a reason for a movement, and I think businesses need to have speed of delivery and consistent delivery, and so solving all these cultural problems lead to that, right? So you align IT not with the technology they use, whether it's some big box piece of software to manage their stuff or some open source thing, but rather how fast they can deliver the services to add business value. So get everyone in line with that, and it's not just. Maybe it should be called business DevOps or biz DevOps or something, because they need to align the things that they're doing with the delivery.
John, we have hours and hours of you talking about DevOps. So
I agree with all these
we're
gentlemen.
going to skip you. So, all right. So a lot of DevOps discussions, but there's emphasis on, we hear a lot about culture here, right? I mean, we talked about, continuous improvement. We talked about, aligning the business, talked about not fighting with people twice. So, but Puppet Labs is a tools vendor, right? Do you guys feel like you have a stake in the culture conversation? What's your responsibility to the larger IT community other than just make the best tools you can? This is for anybody.
Technology cannot solve political problems. There's no question about that. But some political problems are actually caused by technology. For instance, two people trying to communicate using different languages, it's just not going to work. So finding some way for them to use the same language to communicate can actually make some of what look like political problems but are actually communication problems to go away. Similarly, if two people are trying to use completely different technologies to do similar kinds of work, so you've got auditors and sysadmins who both need to do things that look like making changes on the system, the tools can fight that result in the teams fighting. Those are the areas where we have responsibility and we have the ability to make change, to bring a difference. But there are a lot of political and technical problems political and cultural problems that I would not say that we can help. We can maybe make some people a little bit less in pain, but that's.
Right. But do you feel that's within your mission for Puppet Labs to help affect that cultural change, or is that just a nice thing that goes along with?
Well, if you saw Randall's talk today, Randall's talk was all about design, and Randall was talking about how bad design causes users to spend more time being pissed and less time getting work done. We want to make great software that causes all of its users to spend less time being pissed and more time getting great work done.
And great design is driven by empathy for the user. Like, what's their situation? What's going on in their seat? And so you can't ignore the environment they're in. You can't ignore the political environment they're in. By making it easy for them to be successful and communicate with others, you facilitate better culture.
Great.
So yeah, we do think about it a lot.
Good. So another question. So we've seen this as Puppet Labs has evolved. It's more than just Puppet, right? I mean, there's the kind of things that I don't want to call them side projects, but things like Factor, M Collective. You got things like the Puppet Cloud Provisioner. Is that the right term? Yeah. So these tools, and in the sort of operations space, especially in the more of the kind of DevOps focused operations space, people use tools and tool chains, right? Especially in the open source world, they're picking and choosing what they want, whether they're integrated in a continuous loop or they're just I've got my stack of tools that I'm going to use. Sort of that's been the legacy and the culture of the open source tool side is people put together their tool chains. It seems like Puppet Labs is adding kind of more and more pieces to that. Do you see in the future that people will still be building tool chains, or do you look at it as it's part of Puppet's mission to provide you all the pieces you need, sort of in one box or in one loosely coupled chain?
So I think it's a bit of both. I think there are certainly it's about the customer who consumes that. So that the people who consume that those chains of tools tend to be the sort of early adopters. A traditional sysadmin in an enterprise consumes a tool like BladeLogic or HPSA, and mostly they consume it without a choice. So in the Bay, for example, if you were lucky, you get to say, oh, Jordan Cecil does the best logging tool, I can grab that. Or I like Puppet, or I like Chef, you can grab that. But in those sort of traditional IT environments, you can't do that. So I think we want to offer a tool chain to people in those environments that makes their life easier and makes it better for them to be able to do their jobs in a sort of more efficient and effective way, but also provide components too. So modular things like, if you only want to take orchestration, grab that, grab the open source M Collective stuff and do what you want with it. Take the cloud provisioner and slap that into your environment. I think we cater really well for both of those sort of customers.
And one of my big focuses has always been to have people write less redundant code. The developers are really good about writing and using libraries, and sysadmins are crap at it. I can point to, I believe, 7 other implementations of Factor-like capability. Right. And before Factor, none of them were usable by any other project. And that was really frustrating. And so one of the goals of Factor was to build something that, yes, it's small, and the goal is to stay small, but to build something that would cause you to never have to write that tool again. And there are a lot of other tools that have a similar kind of problem where people go, well, this does like 99% of what I want, but I don't like the way it has too many E's in the name or something, and they write their own again. Right. And so I think there is, to some extent, we have to begin consolidating tools. We have to have tools that we share and we build together, because if we don't do that, then we're going to all be off in our own little forest, building our own little houses, and we're never going to make real progress forward.
Why do you think there is that is kind of one of the more, I guess not glaring, but once you see it, it's one of the more stark differences between the traditionally development side of the house, traditionally operations side of the house. Developers will do anything to avoid writing a framework or a tool over again in most cases.
I don't know how many different hibernation-like frameworks are there in Java.
But it's different. It does seem to be different than on the operations side, where where there is a kind of sense of it's their value. Their value is the fact that they're the tool smith, not the operations architect that decides how to better use tools. But it's my value as I can write that thing if I only had another few weeks to write it. Let me take a crack at it. Why do you think that culture? Where do you think it came from, and why do you think it's there? I mean, John, you have a lot of history in this.
I think that it's part of the culture that they're not developers. I mean, when we first met Luke, I thought he was crazy. He was trying to tell me that operations had to become more like developers. I was like, this guy's out of his brain. And a year and a half later, I'm like, he was so right and I was so wrong. And I think operations lives and breathes. Their job is not to write code. It's to get things done, do it, and say they don't attack. I think what the beauty of DevOps is DevOps is, 3 guys that started a company, 3 developers, 1 guy pulls the short straw, he becomes the ops guy. But what does he do? He automates everything, right? He writes code to do everything. And it's hard for the legacy infrastructure people to get that, right? I mean,
well, also in like a legacy environment, there's a persona, right? There are sysadmins who are tools builders. Luke was a tool builder in his sysadmin role, and so that's also something, like, people get a lot of praise for building their one tool to solve this problem internally. And the software that people have produced for this traditionally has been pretty bad. So no one's gone, well, why'd you produce this tool? Because something good exists.
There's a unique snowflake problem too.
Yeah.
So every sysadmin thinks their environment is special and unique, and they have their job because they know it inside out. So their tool is the best fit to solve their problem. And sometimes they're right, but only on the edge cases. It's like 80-20. And there might be 20% of the stuff that you need to customize, but the vast majority of the time, syslogging is syslogging is syslogging, configuration management is configuration management, and it's just about finding the right tool that meets your requirements rather than sort of reinventing the wheel every.
And this is why the tool change is so important. Having a bunch of small tools that have relatively tight focus is really important, because one big tool can't cover the 80-20 case very effectively. Right. But 10 small tools almost anybody can construct 6 to 10 of those tools into a way that covers the 80% case.
And this is what the monitoring people are just discovering. It's like the big, huge, enterprise-wide monitoring tools or treating Nagios like that. It doesn't work.
But if you can separate data collection from data aggregation, from alerting, from display, all those pieces, those are separate tools.
Right.
But no monitoring company today ships them as separate tools.
Right. That's right. Okay, so I want to get back to that. Actually, that we kind of were touching on the componentization of the various pieces of the Puppet Labs offering. In the future, what should users expect? Do they expect more components, more integration, more of both? I mean, what should people? I mean,
you know what's coming, right? Go.
Both. I mean,
philosophy-wise, you don't have to make. If you want to make a big announcement right now, go make a big announcement.
I made the big announcement this morning. I mean, it's exactly what I said this morning. You should expect both. What we're building, we essentially have 2 strategies. We're building an open source tool chain and a commercial integrated platform.
Right.
Platform's not the right word. A commercial integrated. All of our commercial applications are essentially they're integrated, fully capable, and covering a smaller problem space.
And yet you don't have to adopt them to cover everything out of the box, right? You can start with a single file across tens of nodes. And we have customers who out of the gate get a lot of value from that. And then over time, increase your, what we call it, coverage, your automation coverage.
And we're certainly going to have customers who are going to be traditional Puppet customers. They're just going to use Puppet Enterprise to do configuration management. Orchestration, they're like, that'd be really cool, but I don't really see the need for it. And they probably don't have a need for it, but they don't see it. And they're probably going to sit at that sort of bottom end of the ramp for quite a prolonged period of time. They still get considerable value out of that, they would otherwise have to manually do.
And we try to find a way to not have 2 strategies in it. And we just, everywhere we looked, there was this clear cleaving of the path. There was this clear split. And we just went, all right, well, we'll just have to embrace that.
Right. So a big part of the configuration management and change management practice itself is security, right? Especially in the enterprise. What can you guys do to help help security, and sort of where can Puppet go to help security? I mean, you see a lot of tools like Tripwire and what was the one, Solid Core? I think McAfee owns them now. And just kind of a lot of point solutions that enterprises love to take because it's a great sell to the CIO. We're going to make sure that this thing is secure, right? And if it's not secure, we're going to tell you, or we're going to stop them from changing things. And it seems to be there's a conflict there, in where people are going to put their effort into different things change in the box. So, I mean, what's Puppet's role in that now, sort of as it is, and sort of what can these type of, where can you go with this?
Did he set you up? That's a low-fat one, right? That's a low-fat one, right?
I was going to say, well, today, I mean, there are plenty of people that use Puppet for security compliance, auditing and enforcement at the same time. And it's a lot of roll your own. You have to put together all the things you want to make sure you manage, and the monitoring of it. You might have to add some things to it, but it works pretty well for that today. And it's nice because it's integrated into your configuration management. I say all the time that security is just a subset of your configuration management. At least security auditing and compliance, that part of it. Obviously, like intrusion detection is a kind of different area. So I think as people have to go roll out into the cloud, where you can't do this like ad hoc, I'm going to once a quarter go through my security
Word
check.
document.
Yeah, and have some external. I need to do continuous security compliance auditing. We're in a really good position to help with that, and you can already see really good examples. There's an open source project called, unfortunately, SecState that uses Puppet to do NIST compliance, and that's used by the federal government in lots of areas. So there's lots of good stories around it today. You can use Puppet for it.
And obviously, the compliance tool we announced today is great at some aspects of security management. One of the great things about Puppet is it is a tool for doing discovery on your host, right? Yes, you usually use it to do discovery, comparison, and writing, but you don't have to do all 3. You can just do discovery. Our compliance tool allows you to run queries to figure out what does my state look like, and then you can do analysis on the results of those queries to see, are we in some sort of vulnerable state? And we were talking about doing, I think Randall was saying, if you want to find out that a certain version of a package is installed on your entire infrastructure in a couple of clicks, well, that package might be a vulnerable version of Puppet, or not a Puppet, of another piece of software. Check for that vulnerability, one click, and am I a victim to this, right?
Yeah. I think the key thing people overlook is that security isn't about patching things and about vulnerabilities, it's about risk. It actually has very little to do with technology. And you can actually run an environment that has low risk with massively outdated infrastructure and not care, because you don't lose any money if it all goes pear-shaped. So the key about risk is making risk decisions is good information and good data and good metrics. And most security people make those decisions with very limited information and very limited data. And so Puppet provides them with a platform to say, I can actually work out how much effort it's going to be and how much percentage of my fleet is exposed. Okay, it's all the payment systems. We better fix that right now. Or it's all this bunch of legacy systems that are ring-fenced behind 6 firewalls and they don't contain any customer data and they don't have any transactions on them. If we lose them, it'd be painful, but no one's going to kill us. And that's a low risk in the risk register. And those sort of decisions, they cost serious money. And deciding whether you're going to patch the latest Microsoft patch or patch Apache on those things, I mean, that could be the whole operations team spending a week patching 1,000 systems. That's a serious investment because they're not going to get their day job done at the same time.
And again, thinking about the fact that today your security teams are using one tool base and your management teams are using a completely different tool chain, and they, can I just say, hate each other. And so moving to a world where you have a single tool chain that has a common base of functionality. This is how I look at the system, this is how I manage the system, this is how I assess information. Having a shared understanding there, so when you're talking about a package or a user or a service, you're always talking about the same thing. You're always talking about using the same language. It becomes a lot easier to get along. It becomes a lot easier to work. So we're going to have a security ops and an audit ops movement in a couple of years maybe.
Great. So this is a question, I think it's building off the idea of state. And so I know it's near and dear to John's heart, so he'll probably chime in on this one. But so managing desired state, right? It seems to be kind of it's a problem with a known solution, right? Tools like Puppet, they're there to be your source of truth for the desired state and then take some action on it, right? You might know where this is going, but what about the active state? What about where's the source of truth for what actually is going on in that world? And figuring that we're now working in this kind of cloudy, ephemeral world, knowing the active state is becoming increasingly important. So is there an answer there? What's the answer there? Is it something that the Puppet does or should be helping to solve, or is it something that we should be looking for another component in the tool chain to help out with?
Well, I was going to say, is it a Puppet problem? Or is it somebody else's problem? I mean,
So what I would, there are two ways to ask that question. You could say, is it a Puppet problem or is it a Puppet Labs problem? And I don't think it's a Puppet problem per se. I think that portions of Puppet are related to that problem. So Puppet is good at telling you what the current state is. But there aren't tools today that give you that take that information and give it to you in a useful way. So you actually can consume, say, the current real state of 1,000 systems running in 5 data centers, whatever. Our reporting systems do a pretty good job, but the data can be up to half an hour stale. And when you're asking about real estate, you're often curious about that with different business purposes in mind. You're not wondering, the things that I was trying to do, did they happen perfectly? You're really trying to say, like, things are going to merge out of my infrastructure, and I'd like to know what those things are and how they look. You can get that information from Puppet, but you have to kind of treat the existing plumbing that exists, but you have to build new applications on top of it that are focused on answering those kind of questions with this existing infrastructure. So yes, it's a Puppet problem in some ways, but it's more something we would be building on top of that. And I do think it's a Puppet Labs problem, absolutely.
So just to be clear, when I think about active state, I don't even think about like near-time active state. I'm talking about decisions about, is the instance really alive, or convergence of multi-topology infrastructures that need to rely on each other, which we see a lot of things solved with problems like Zookeeper right today. But so yeah, so you see that as a Puppet Labs, something you're going to have to solve.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on how big our goals are, but they're quite large. So
yeah, no, that's a big opportunity. So cool.
So another thing that keeps coming up is kind of the cutting-edge DevOps practitioners. They're obsessed with data, right? Data about their systems, data about their processes. What's Puppet's role in analytics, or actually, what should your configuration management tools? What analytics should it be thrown off? What analytics should it be looking to? Does it play into that space, and how does it integrate with the rest of the data in the world?
I mean, the compliance product we talked about this morning is the first small step in that direction, right? Is that you can look into your infrastructure and see things, how they're evolving, how they're changing over time, whether or not they're under active management Puppet. And so you can identify, it gives you visibility that you didn't have before, and you see something that's hot, see something that's changing quickly, see something that's out of compliance, then you can start wrapping your Puppet control over that. And so it's a way to kind of incrementally get going with management without having to commit whole hog out of the gate. And so, before you'd have to put that whole thing under active control. Now you can just kind of incrementally invest and honestly let that guide you as you ramp your automation coverage.
And data is always really, really key to Puppet. And I really do think data is, in addition to kind of ease of use and just generally better design, I think data is the second major differentiator to Puppet. We know more about your infrastructure than anybody else. We know every host you're managing and all the information that is needed to build those hosts, but we also know every resource you're managing, every dependency between all those resources, and all the events that have ever happened on those resources. And no one can come close to that today. Because no one else has invested in the graph and in the dependency requirements that we have in our system. And so what you'll see us investing in over the next near future is applications to put that data in front of the user to say, here's what's going on, here's what's happening. I don't know what you're going to do with it, but I'm sure you're going to figure it out. Obviously, we're going to build applications with the intent of you doing certain things, but the point is put the data in front of the user. And absolutely that data we think is entirely critical. And we have the infrastructure in place to be able to say things like, here's the portion of your infrastructure management. Here's the portion that you're actively managing. Here's the portion you're auditing. Here's the percent of your system that you're getting management coverage on.
Right.
Like you would do test coverage.
Cool. So moving on to another hot topic of the day. People seem to talk about service orchestration, right? What does that mean, really? What does it mean to you guys? And sort of how to is this another problem in the Puppet or Puppet Labs domain?
So I said at DevOps Days in Mountain View that the node is dead. If you care about your hosts, you're gonna forget that in the not too distant future. You should care about services because that's what your customers care about. The business cares about the business service. They don't care about the technology, they don't care about the host, they don't care about the hardware you've chosen, they don't care whether you've chosen Puppet, Chef, a bash script or anything. All they care about is the business service delivers the SLA at the value that they want. So service orchestration is key to that. And I think from my perspective, the ability to actually look at something from a service perspective and have all of the underlying resources be sort of like Luke describes it as the infrastructure going away. That's the key value you deliver. You're able to look at a service and go, I understand how this service fits together, I understand the availability, the service levels, the cost of it, and I know what metrics to watch to make sure that's on keel. And I think M Collective, I guess, is a little bit of a step towards a sort of discovery piece around that, but I think that's clearly a problem we need to solve. And there's certainly a bunch of roadmap stuff for us that sort of falls into place in there. I think there's lots of problems, technical problems. So we had drinks with a bunch of the architecture characters from Puppet Labs the other night, and I think we had 8 people around the table and 18 opinions about how service orchestration was going to be solved. But the very fact that there's a whole domain that that's sort of really exciting to explore.
I can tell you this. You'll be able to tell when we've solved it because people won't talk about orchestration anymore. Nobody talks about resource orchestration in Puppet, right? People talk about you build this graph and then it just happens in the right order. You don't have to talk about orchestration is complicated. It's difficult. You're talking about workflows, and if you go to kind of enterprise products that do workflows and things like that, they're run books and it's all very procedural. And Puppet doesn't work like that, right? That's never been our world. So you can tell if we solve this, it probably won't look very much like orchestration as the rest of the world thinks about it. It'll look a lot more like the way Puppet already thinks about the world.
One of the things I worry about with service orchestration is, first off, it's like, last year I used to go around and show this, press a button and deploy a stack, and a third of the room would clap, the 2/3 of the room would just scratch their head saying, I don't get it, and now this year it's all the buzz, right? You got Ensemble, now called Juju, you got, in a certain way, Cloud Foundry, OpenShift kind of solved the problem. I worry that we're getting very horizontal on this problem, and it's just going to get really ugly before it gets better. And unless you or the other guys, really kind of figure out a way to jump out and say, this is the way, this is the way it's got to be done. Best cut. I mean, does it worry you at all? I mean, if I'm in your shoes, I'm worried. Like Juju, and wait a minute, you're going to have all these people branching off the wrong way, and
I worry about anything when somebody's trying to ship anything that's composed primarily of shell scripts.
The other thing is, people can build that layer of orchestration, and Puppet's a framework too. So if people have orchestration layers like Rundeck today, you can if it's just a runbook style that's not the way we model the world, you can still benefit from using Puppet's framework and what exists today. So you don't have to wait to be able to orchestrate on us having the perfect solution, because we're trying to figure it out. You know,
And the world's full of customers.
Yeah.
And there are certain customers for whom this is not a problem.
Right.
You know, if you have 10 machines, or you have a branch network with one server and a file and print server, and you know, your problems are different problems. And I think a lot of the customers with the sort of the whole stack problem, you know, they're going to choose the product that best meets their needs, that delivers that quality and that price point for them, and the right service levels. And you know, I think it's going to be us. But you know, I'm kind of invested in the company. But you know, if it's you know, I think we think there needs to be a lot of exploratory ideas out there. People need to try a bunch of different things, because I don't think we're going to necessarily be right all of the time. Yeah. And I'm perfectly happy to steal stuff from people if they've got a better idea.
It works, yeah. And my belief is that it should all come down to fundamental technology. If you aren't, anybody who's out there building something that is a point solution, that isn't meant to be integrated with other things, that isn't meant to work with other things, that isn't meant to be a base that other things can be built on top of, they're making a mistake and they're building a dead end. This is one of the reasons I was really excited about Cloud Foundry, is that Cloud Foundry was built to be pluggable, to support this kind of connectivity to other things. And nobody had even, frankly, open sourced a PaaS before. Right. But certainly nobody had built one that was explicitly saying, we're building a targeted point solution that does a little bit, and everything else you have to integrate, and we want you to do that.
I think with they just announced that the Python and the PHP stuff has just gone sort of out of beta into production.
Right,
That's all community contributed.
Yeah.
That VMware did not.
And a local company, AppFog, contributed PHP.
So that's actually good. The next kind of hot topic, the PaaS, right? You know, these things like Cloud Foundry, OpenShift, CloudFormation to a degree, right? So it seems like, you know, there's the cloud camps, right? That basically, maybe it's the sort of, you know, let's do everything through kind of shipping shipping images around, right? And they've got their sort of built-in pieces. It's kind of another sort of maybe horizontal fragmentation, right? There's like kind of the big pieces. There's the infrastructure as service, right? The IaaS stuff.
I think you have one, not enough days there.
I heard the other day the Germans call it Yas.
Yeah.
I haven't figured out a way
and
to
then there's
pronounce it, so.
I don't know how many A's I put in there. And then there's the PaaS, right? So, you know, where does Puppet fit in that picture? And sort of, is it in a seam? Is it under it all? Is it above it all? I mean, what?
And I just want to check.
Where's it
So
fit in that
this is
world?
one of my questions. Is that I struggle with where does infrastructure as a service end and where does PaaS start? Right. That to me is something I struggle. But then I also think about, and I have my opinions that are probably similar to you, where products like infrastructure as code fit in that where they bleed. So that's kind of the question. If that makes sense.
So the infrastructure service to me is like, it's really sexy that you can turn on a VM, but like seriously, no one ever said to themselves, you know what I want to do today? Turn on 1,000 VMs. You know, like James was saying, it's about whether your services are running. So turning on a VM without the ability to actually make it do something useful is not very useful. The service that Amazon provides you is turning on a VM. So for them, that's the service. But everybody else, the VM has to do something useful. And Puppet is, you know, obviously in our opinion, but in the opinion of a heck of a lot of people using EC2, the best way to take that VM and make something useful out of it. And now when it comes to a PaaS, you have this problem of, okay, well the PaaS is usually good at modeling, they might claim more than this, but usually good at modeling one part of the system. And that's usually the overall big picture. But when it comes down to the bits on disk, they're often not as good at that. Puppet happens to be fantastic at the bits on disk. So when you look at Cloud Foundry, for one, Cloud Foundry itself is software that has to be managed. So there's a built-in management problem that we do okay, which is why there are Cloud Foundry Puppet modules out there. But then you also have, when Cloud Foundry says, I want another one of those boxes, or I want another web server or a database server, who's responsible for taking that VM that's now being told you're going to be a web server and turning it into a web server? Somebody somewhere has to take a VM and the statement that you're a web server and make it into a web server. And Cloud Foundry doesn't do that at all. It does pieces that are related to that, and it knows how, okay, I know how to take a thing that's capable of running Rails servers, Rails applications, and run another Rails application. But it doesn't really know how to make a thing capable of running Rails applications. So there still is a lot of room for management problems that sit below that stack.
And Amazon clearly recognizes that with CloudFormation. I mean, the whole purpose of the CloudFormation services, we've got a lot of disparate services that are essentially infrastructure as a service. oh, you actually want to use them together and configure them? Oh, hang on a tick, we better build something here. And even then, CloudFormation is still at that high level, and it still needs that granular control. And that's one of the reasons why we talk to Amazon guys often about how do we fit the Puppet bits into the CloudFormation.
I say that's what drove the provisioning piece, right? Is that folks just don't want an empty container. They want to do something interesting with that container, and they want to do it with a single command or a very simple set of commands. And so,
And also, if you have your pass deployed out there and you find there's a security vulnerability in one of the packages that's delivered on one of the VMs, you still need to manage that. And you're not going to redeploy your entire application in order to deal with that because that's just not expedient. So you're going to either go back to writing a SSH in a for loop to deal with it, or you have the VMs actually modeled as well.
And I don't have my Puppet shirt, but I would add one more piece, which is the whole compliance and like the fact that you have no meta layer. Like CloudFormation is great, and I can launch it, and I can be running 1,000 instances under it, but I still have no meta layer of what the role is of any of that infrastructure.
Yeah.
Right?
And hence products like Zookeeper and like Noah, there is that intelligence there that you need to actually bestow on those applications. It doesn't magically appear when you bring the applications up.
So we started talking about DevOps, and then we jumped right into ops, and more ops. We are at an operations conference, I see on the banner. But you're talking about it's all about the running services. It's all about the business, enabling the business. So enabling the business, there's a supply chain there, right? Someone's got to write that code, test that code. The factory needs to get fed somewhere. So have other than kind of talk about everyone should get along and more people should join each other's Scrum. What can we offer as operations folks back to developers? In a lot of the DevOps kind of conversations, it's about taking operations work and turn it into a little bit more like development work, where your infrastructure is code, putting everything through a software development lifecycle, checking things in, right? And a lot of developers go, hey, that's cool. And they show up at the first DevOps stuff, and they're like, hey, that's awesome. You guys are doing stuff that I've been doing ever. Good on you. I don't have to go to the next one. You guys, call me when you get some really advanced like, branching and merging, right? So, what do we give back?
RCS.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, it's this conversation's got to go the other way, right? We're talking about all this awesome stuff on the operations side. How do we actually make that handoff smoother, or that flow come from development to operations? Is it teach everybody Puppet? I mean, I know that
Obviously.
that's one answer. But is that really
Teach and sell everybody Puppet.
Is it realistic? Yeah, sorry, Scott, that was your answer. You missed that one. So I mean, what is the answer? How do we bridge that gap, and what can the people in this room do to help make that happen?
I actually think there's an underlying problem that we don't address often enough, and actually there's a few people who say this is the fact that there's a bigger problem and that's the operations and development's relationship with the business. It's all well and good for operations and developers to talk about, I'm using a distributed version control system, but they all need to be on the same page with regards to what is the actual business objective of this? What does this product do? What does our customers experience? And I think developers suck at that too. I mean, developers, the whole classic stories of developers get specifications, spit out crap code, and when they throw that over the fence to operations, they're not throwing it only over the fence to operations, they're throwing it to the business too. Right. And I think both parties need to actually sit down and go, we could actually solve a lot of these problems a lot more easily if we understood what our actual underlying business requirements were and what the business expects from us, and then we can work out what the technological components are that solve that, and the cultural and the cultural things and the process and how we get deployment right and all that sort of stuff.
Some of the things we were talking about before in terms of like, how do you take some of this data and make it useful to folks upstream, right? Up in the workflow. So you take some of the data about the infrastructure, about what you're accomplishing, give transparency to that and move it up the workflow so folks can see like, okay, it's not a black box. Right. Here's the levers to pull to kind of get the performance out that you need that is business driven versus technology.
I can point to two examples with our user and customer base of how people have solved this that I think are really point to the future. One of them is one of our customers replaced all their developers are responsible for not just shipping the applications, but shipping Puppet code to manage the applications. So when that application goes into production, the code built and shipped by the developers knows how to put the application in production and maintain it in production. The sysadmins are then responsible. When there's a problem, they're responsible for the operational state, but when there's any kind of problem like the app doesn't clean up its logs or something like that, Sysadmins fix that. Then they file a bug against the code that maintains that application. So that's one way for the teams to work together. They have a shared understanding of responsibility, and they both understand what they're trying to do. Another way is, one of the big problems with development is it's actually really, really difficult to test your own code in something that resembles production. It's very difficult to say, okay, and the reason these guys are laughing is because we're doing things like trying to make it easy for a developer in our organization to spin up an mcollective instance with 10 VMs to run orchestration tests on their laptop, and it turns out it's wicked freaking difficult.
Actually, it's 100.
Yeah,
I think he laughed at us when we said 10. He was like, that's not a development environment. This is orchestration.
So it is a real problem, and that makes it really easy to go, well, I can't solve this problem. Operations has to solve the testing problem, and so I'm going to kick it over the wall. When operations can make it easy for development to spin up a completely functional development environment that really closely mirrors production, so the developer can actually go, okay, now I can walk through the paces, I can go and see what the experience is. Then they can, and that's something that I think operations can and really should be delivering. So if operations isn't maintaining development to the same standards as production, and frankly, if every developer doesn't have their own completely standalone development environment delivered and maintained by operations, and preferably delivered and maintained by tools built by operations, then operations isn't doing enough to help development deliver great software.
We can use the Wayback Machine when people were talking about SLA before they started talking about passes and everything else, and it required this. Like all of a sudden you have this complicated service-oriented architecture for business, and what they wanted is to be able to plug in new services so they can get value faster. Well, they forgot that the testing this in an operational way and developing against it is really difficult. Well, if we can automate that, we can help build replicas of the operational environment. Let developers test, they can actually deliver service-oriented architectures that deliver the business value in a way that's reliable and not scared of change.
So we're kind of running up against our time here, so I want to toss in a couple of Puppet Labs focused questions that people seem to be very curious about. So we'll just kind of go through them quickly. Why the move to the Apache license?
This was pretty easy. So we did some simple math. If we stay GPL, then there are going to be a certain number of people who decide not to partner with us or integrate with us because we're GPL. And there are going to be a certain number of people who decide to pay to relicense the software under commercial license. And if we go to Apache, then the people who would pay are not going to pay us, but some of those people who decided not to partner with us are going to partner with us. And so essentially we said, are the people who are going to pay us, is that money more valuable than the partnerships that we'd get from the people who would otherwise not partner with us? We said the partnerships are more valuable. Puppet being pervasive is more valuable than the revenue we can get from.
Interesting. So it was a business decision, not a community.
Absolutely. And if you look at, was it 2 people complained in the community? And I was shocked. I was expecting, tar babies in my front yard. I was expecting all kinds of insanity.
Pay for bodyguards, a bunch of Israeli guys circle the house.
Really, we had 2 people complain. We had one person, threatened to fork. One person claimed that the license change was a fork. Actually, it's not so much that he threatened to fork as he said that I had forked it. 2 people. I was shocked. So
that's interesting. So now you mentioned there's the license side too, right? There's Puppet Enterprise. So do you feel like Puppet Enterprise has in any way changed the social contract you have, or the expectations, or any kind of the relationship with the community?
Since day one, I've always said, I'm in this to eat. I'm in this to make a living. I'm in this to build a company. We have, you guys have been saying it, we have hard problems. We have very hard problems. These problems were here 10 years ago. Why weren't people building solutions to these problems 10 years ago? It takes a lot of developers, it takes a lot of focus, it takes a lot of people and a lot of time to solve these problems. I don't think we can solve these problems without making money that can pay people to survive and to eat. And I've always said that. I've always been extremely open about it. I've had a slide in almost every one of my presentations saying the test for whether Puppet is good enough is if I can make enough money to eat. That was always the test. And in my experience, being upfront about that and saying that to everybody, no one's confused, no one's surprised. Again, I'm not getting the,
Sure.
I expected feedback. I expected people to kind of rant and gnash their teeth. And so far, it doesn't seem to have changed the social contract that much.
Okay, so far, because things seem kind of, there's that alignment, right? But at what point, if there is a dispute, right, how do you solve that dispute between, Puppet Enterprise and the community? At some point, there is the possibility for that, for that tension. How do you resolve that? How are you going to resolve what goes into Puppet Enterprise, what goes into the community?
Arbitrarily and capriciously, like I do all the other
Fair enough. At least you're being honest.
Being upfront again, right?
Just being honest about it, yeah, being upfront about it. So.
We have serious conversations about it internally, and we try to have them openly too. So and Luke is just capricious about it. and we move on.
I think to remember that we are an open source company. So Nigel Kirsten and myself both come from a very strong open source background. We actually fight every single time. Our sales guys hate us. They're like, we don't want to don't make it free. Don't make it free. We want to sell things. But we fight long and hard about this where this line is drawn. Because people, we all to some extent have some feeling about the community. We love you guys. You guys contribute amazing code. You contribute amazing bugs. You contribute amazing ideas. You bitch
and viral uses, right? You tell your friends about Puppet. You tell your coworkers about Puppet. You preach to the unconverted.
Yeah, and we had so the community has very strong advocates in the company, and I don't think that's going to change.
And this came up with the licensing, like anything that blocks adoption. Generally, I mean, it's debated internally, but anything that blocks adoption, there's pretty good alignment amongst the team. Like, we don't do that.
Yeah.
And we'll probably get something wrong along the way,
Yeah.
and we'll fix it. I mean, I'm sure we won't be perfect on it.
And my perspective is basically, as long as you have the incentives aligned appropriately, as long as the reason to produce open source software is the right reason, and the reason to produce commercial software is the right reason, and the whole company is extremely aware of what those reasons are, and the whole community is aware, right? No one's going to be surprised next year when we produce this commercial software, but this other piece of software is open source. No one's going to be surprised because they know what incentives are around producing one kind of software versus another.
Scott, maybe this is something that's in your camp here since you came from the venture world. SaaS, the whole SaaS idea, that everything needs to be a service, everything needs to be on demand. It's all the rage across the board, right? What's your SaaS answer? And and that seems to be permeated into management tools, monitoring tools. It just kind of this seems to be the take something, throw some Salesforceification kind of on it, and that's the winning way. Puppet is decidedly, you guys chose from business to go towards the on-premises installed licensed software, the old school, right? Why is that? Sort of what? Why do you think
the
that
way the whole world does everything?
It needs to be. Yeah, exactly.
Code word, enterprise.
Enterprise, right? Okay. So yeah, I mean that's a good question. Why is that?
Our competition has decided to do that recently, I think, too.
Well, the question, I think, is it a business model that you've thought about, or it's just been completely off the radar? I mean, it's a question I've had for
We
quite a
never
while.
thought about it, John.
John, you and I have had this.
I haven't heard it, so.
You and I had this conversation, I guess, peripherally, but so some people you used to work for obviously thought this is a very strong business model. And I actually said to them, and obviously I'm biased, I said to them, I think it's a really stupid idea. I don't think you're going to make any money. I have no idea whether they have or haven't, whatever, but I look at our customers and they say to us, this is not something we're interested in. Our customers are like, we don't want to put this out of the organization. We want control of this. And not only that, there's a security guy who lives down this, like a Nomi trolley guy who lives down the corridor. I'm telling him we're going to stick our configuration out in the cloud. Okay, I'd like to keep my job and stuff. And so I think from our perspective, the vast majority of our customers say, we want an
but that's it.
It actually did not come. It didn't come from John, but it did not come from either. It was a crowdsourced question.
You choose your segments and then you line your product, and it sounds like market speak, right? But like enterprise guys have these issues. They need on-premise solutions, kind of webby, mobile type products or type companies. They're much more comfortable with something up in the cloud, and then there's a segment for that and a product that fits those segments.
And Luke articulated this morning, like that, why fight over the 1% of the market that already has a clue?
Exactly.
I want to hit the other 95% of the market that needs to have the clue stick in.
And the 4% that doesn't know how to do math.
John's lucky I'm not the CFO.
That's right.
And the other piece I would add to that is, I fully expect we will have a hosted model at some point. I think in 3 to 5 years that will be a great business, and we will have a business unit devoted to that. But I want the fundamentals to be there first. I want the run rate business to kick ass, and when that's in place, then we can afford to have this thing that it might work, it might fail, but if it fails, it won't destroy the company.
I mean, so I was at Loud Cloud, right, 10 years ago, which is the original PaaS play, and Loud Cloud was right in the late 90s when you were stamping out capacity for startups, because they were okay with that. When the startup market went away at the end of the 90s, when the market rolled over, we tried to get into the enterprise. Enterprise was not okay with PaaS, right? So it's really, it's market dependent, maturity dependent.
This conversation is almost an exact echo of the whole, in 1999, a lot of people believed no one would own servers anymore. Everything would be in a public data center, and no one have servers. Right. That obviously hasn't quite
So
happened.
you're saying it can and it is and always will be the model of the future.
Yes.
Got it. So, all right, last question here. This came from total left field, but somebody actually asked this, so I'm going to ask it. This is for the former ops practitioners here at the table. No joke, verbatim. What's the biggest mistake you've ever made as a sysadmin?
The biggest mistake I ever made is.
Oh, I can answer
Anybody
that
got
one.
one?
I'm not sure I can answer that one very
You're
quickly.
answering, you know his
I
mistake.
have a bad one. No, I worked in a casino. It was a midday on a Friday, and all the slot machines in the casino were run by an AS400. And I was applying a patch that was supposed to get, you hit enter, and the patch is scheduled for 4 a.m. and the AS400 goes down, the backup machine takes over, all the slot machines keep working, everyone puts their money in. So I hit the thing, and I looked at the machine, and it started whirring, and the lights started flashing, and I'm like, oh. And so 800 to 1,000 poker machines died in the middle of Friday lunch hour, which is an incredibly busy time in a casino. And I had to walk into the CIO's office and say, for the next hour and 45 minutes while this machine IPLs, we will not have any slot machines. I'm very lucky that he didn't fire me. The CFO wanted to fire me, but yeah, needless to say, it wasn't a job I kept for very long after that.
You were not. Sorry, I forgot. You were a system.
Data center
Yeah,
ops.
there we go.
As a manager of ops, full disclosure, right? As a manager of ops, I once sent out everyone's salary to the full distribution. the spreadsheet where you got everyone's salary in it, that was awesome.
That's awesome.
That was awesome.
Can anybody top that one?
I got a good one. I don't know if I can top that one. I actually stacked a bunch of boxes up against the wall, but I didn't realize on the wall was a red button. Oh. And the boxes.
Red button.
I didn't hit it, but the boxes did.
Those damn boxes.
All right, is that it?
I haven't made any mistakes that are very interesting. My favorite operations mistake that I know of is there's a restaurant here in town, just a couple blocks over, Pozzo's. The manager one day walked down into the basement where the server that ran the restaurant was, and saw there was water dripping from the suspended ceiling above the server. And of course, the only reasonable thing to do at that point is pick up the panel right above the server. And so all the water poured onto the server. That's yeah. But
War stories. Tayo, you got anything, or you don't make mistakes? Do you?
I don't make mistakes. No, I think the worst thing that ever happened to me is I took down an entire network for a financial company I work for with a bad NIC in a Solaris box. But I got rewarded for it because I just unplugged the NIC. I knew immediately what was happening because I had tested this and it was causing a broadcast storm. So I got rewarded for my biggest failure.
so there you go.
That's a good story.
So they gave me $1,000.
Create a problem.
Fixing problems is the most important thing.
That's right.
Whether you cause the problem.
MTTR, baby, MTTR.
All right, so hey, we're out of time. I'll make all you guys, everyone, James, Scott, Luke, Teyo, John, my man. Thank you all for watching.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, we'll get the next session started as quickly as you can do. So